Boa tarde a todos. Gostaria de agradecer a presença, tantos colegas e amigos ilustres aqui nessa tarde. Fiquei muito honrada de ser convidada para presidir essa mesa, por ser um tema tão atual, tão relevante, principalmente nesse ano eleitoral. E acho que temos muito a aprender hoje com o professor McCraw. E eu vou, então, apresentar o nosso palestrante. McCraw é vice-presidente e conselheiro geral adjunto do jornal The New York Times Company, onde atua como principal consultor jurídico de redação. Ele é professor adjunto da Escola de Direito da Universidade de Nova York e professor visitante da Escola de Direito em Harvard. Seu livro, Truth in Our Times, será lançado em 2019 pela editora St. Martin's. Ele foi conselheiro geral adjunto do jornal The New York Daily News e sócio do Clifford Chance e Roger Wells. Trabalhou em projetos pro bono em apoio à liberdade de imprensa no Iêmen, Montenegro, Rússia e Kuwait. E realizou workshops sobre questões de direito da imprensa em vários países do Oriente Médio, América do Sul e Europa Central e Oriental. É pós-graduado pela Universidade de Illinois, pela Universidade de Cornell e pela Escola de Direito de Albany. Agora eu passo a palavra ao nosso palestrante, McCraw.
Thank you all for coming out today, and thank you so much for sponsoring this event. I am a lawyer by training, and I have somehow managed to come to Brazil and have only one day in Rio, which is why I'm not a travel planner. It's obviously a huge mistake, but I'm delighted to be here. There will be some funny parts of this presentation today, but none will be funnier than my attempt to use the PowerPoint. So bear with me as I go the wrong direction and so forth. 2 years ago, as a lawyer for the New York Times, I came to learn in a very personal way the power of the internet. In the middle, in the middle of the presidential campaign, the Times ran a story about two women who said they had been groped by Donald Trump many years before. As I said, it was off. At least I did not lie to you. It would be the funniest part of the show. So this was the story that we ran. Two women say Donald Trump touched them inappropriately. I was sent the story before publication. It's the normal process at the New York Times when there's a sensitive story. And I thought it was an important article for the public to know about. Mr. Trump disagreed. He had his lawyer write a letter to the Times demanding that we retract the story and threatening to sue us. The Trump campaign posted that letter from his lawyers online. The next morning was very busy for me, and between meetings I sat down and wrote a letter in response. I had about 45 minutes, and this was the letter that was written. Because the Trump campaign had posted the letter online from their lawyer, the Times decided to put my letter online. I was okay with that. I was fine with that. As a media lawyer, I'm a believer in transparency and openness. I spend my days fighting for greater transparency and more openness. But you don't know anything about transparency until your employer posts your telephone number and email address online. There it was on my letterhead. Suddenly, I was getting hundreds and hundreds of messages from people around the world. Law students, Americans who live abroad, lawyers from Australia, my high school classmates. Even my ex-wife wrote me. That's when I knew I was an internet celebrity. More than 2 million people saw my letter on the Times site, and hundreds of thousands saw it on other sites, somebody tweeting out the letter. And the words that I ended the letter with became famous for a moment in the United States. They were quoted in newspaper stories and elsewhere. We did what the law allows. We published newsworthy information about a subject of deep public concern. If Mr. Trump disagrees, if he believes that American citizens had no right to hear what these women had to say, and that the law of this country forces us and those who would dare to criticize him to stand silent or be punished, we welcome the opportunity to have a court to set him straight. And it was gratifying to be quoted so widely. But for me, the whole event became a powerful reminder, became a very powerful reminder of just how powerful the internet was. In a very personal way, I came to understand that. When you step back and consider Twitter and Facebook and the other platforms, you come face to face with the reality that's behind the whole issue of fake news. Never has a society had more opportunity to be informed. Never has a society had more opportunity to be informed, and never has society had more opportunity to be deceived. That is the truth that is at the heart of this debate over fake news. Now, I'm going to speak to you from a U.S. perspective, and as you will hear and as you probably know, there is great protection of speech in the United States. That includes the New York Times, that includes me as a person, that includes Facebook as an entity, and includes everybody who is on Facebook. The law in the United States tolerates virtually no restraints on publication beforehand. The law in the United States does not allow, except in extraordinary circumstances I haven't seen, for things to be taken down off the internet. And so we approach this from a very different perspective than that you will see it in many countries. When we talk about fake news, though, I like to think about it as two separate problems. One is the problem of fake news the way most people think about it. Stories that are intentionally fabricated and designed to fool the readers. The classic idea of fake news, right? Somebody has created something fake and wants people to believe it. Let me hit on some of the highlights from the last election. Some of you may not have gone to church as often as you should have recently and have fallen out of grace with the Catholic Church, but I'm here to tell you this is not true, okay? The Pope did not endorse Donald Trump, okay? You did not miss anything. This story was viewed by almost 1 million people in the United States, and somebody did a public opinion poll. 8% of the people believed that, in fact, the Pope had endorsed Donald Trump. Not true. Same here. FBI agents suspected in Hillary email leaks found dead in apparent murder-suicide. No, there was no FBI agent involved in a murder-suicide. This was a fake news story. It was seen by 560,000 people. And it was both sides where we saw fake news. I have some sad news for my fellow Americans who are unhappy about the Trump election. This story is not true. Ireland did not open up refugee camps for people who didn't like Trump to move from the United States. There's no question, Ireland's a beautiful place. There's no question they would run a great refugee camp, but it's not true. And sometimes there were stories that weren't political, that were fake news, but you wish they were true, but they aren't. This one being my favorite: woman arrested for defecating on boss's desk after winning the lottery. I so wanted that to be true. Fake news, fake news. In 2017, my colleague at the New York Times, Scott Shane, a reporter, did a really interesting story where he went and found someone who created a fake news story. And it was a story about a young man named Cameron Harris, 23 years old, who sat at his kitchen table and worked up a story that was completely fake. Here it is. Breaking news, tens of thousands of fraudulent Clinton votes found in Ohio warehouse. And he sat at home, wrote this story. He went online and he stole a picture from the Brexit election in the UK. That's what those boxes are, okay? Those are boxes from England. And he posted it there as if those were the secret Hillary Clinton ballots. And what's extraordinary is what happened next. He pushed out that story on the internet, and it was viewed by 6 million people. 6 million people saw this story. It prompted an investigation by local authorities who went looking for those boxes. Those boxes happened to be in England from a year earlier. Good luck trying to find them. And out of this, Cameron Harris, the man who made that fake news, the fake news site, made $22,000 for a few hours of work, for about 10 hours of work. He was an amateur, of course, compared to the Russians who launched a campaign to fake websites and fake Twitter accounts and to try to undermine the election. When you think about fake news, I think you have to understand why it is so prevalent now. And the reason for that is the very nature of the internet. There is so much content out there, incredible amounts of content, with no gatekeeper, no editor deciding what should be published or what should not. Think about the old days. If you had a news story, you had to find a reporter. The reporter had to find an editor, and maybe it would appear in the local paper. Not anymore. You can get your story out right away. Sometimes that's a very good thing. Some of you may remember when a couple years ago, a video went viral. It showed a United Airlines passenger being dragged off the plane. The plane was overbooked. They didn't have enough seats. And for whatever reason, the flight attendants decided to drag this man off the plane. People filmed it. People posted it on the internet. Nobody had to call their local newspaper and say, you can't believe what happened on my flight today. Nobody had to make a decision about whether that was news. It was instantaneously up. And I have to say, that's a good thing. It had a very positive effect on the airlines and how they treated people. I know this personally. Not long after this incident, I was on an overbooked flight. And I was on this flight, and the flight attendant came to the microphone to ask for volunteers. Said, we're overbooked. We need volunteers to leave the plane. The plane got completely quiet. People reached into their pockets and pulled out their cell phones, clicked on the video, waiting to see what was going to happen. She couldn't have been politer. She actually seemed like a professional hostage negotiator. You know, work with me here, people. That's a good thing. But much of it is not a good thing, much of this instantaneous ability for everyone to be out there. Ev Williams, one of the founders of Twitter, was quoted in the New York Times saying that the internet was broken. And he said it was broken for one simple reason: human nature. He compared it to what happens when you're driving down the highway and you see an accident on the other side of the road. You can't help but look. You can't help but look. You have no role, you're not going to do anything, but you can't help but look. And he says that's a lot about the way the internet is today, that it rewards attention. Not quality, not truth, attention. That's the driving force. People want attention to their websites. And so the shocking and the unbelievable are the things that get clicks. All the financial incentives are lined up to fabricate outrageous stories, stories that will grab people's attention. And that's the lesson that was learned by both people who wanted to make money, like the last slide we saw, as well as those who are trying to influence the election. Here's where I think we need to pause, because nobody really knows what the effect of fake news is. Sometimes there are tragic cases that suggest that it works just the way we would think it does. It misleads people. This was a famous case in the United States. Fake news sites started saying there was a restaurant that was engaged in child abuse, and it was somehow linked to the Democrats, to Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. And this man showed up and was, in fact, came with a gun to this restaurant. And I think that when you see that, you begin to worry, oh, that's what fake news does. The research has not really borne that out. The research has not shown that. Much of the research has shown that, in fact, it doesn't affect people very much. One study found that people who go to fake news sites actually go much more to the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and other legitimate sources. Why is that? Nobody knows. Another site found that despite all of the hype about fake news, that it generally is believed by people who already believed the worst. So Trump supporters believe the pro-Trump fake news. They aren't moved one way or the other. They already held that opinion. And so it's easy to overreact. But, and I was struck as I was doing research for this speech of just how inconclusive it is. Washington Post story. New study suggests fake news might have won Donald Trump the election. Wow. Story from the New York Times shortly thereafter. New study suggests fake news has wide reach but little impact. Well, wait, the Washington Post just said it may have won the election. Then the Columbia Journalism Review came out with the story, don't blame the election on fake news, blame it on the media. I don't like that one. But it just shows you that we don't really know. But the important thing, I think, to keep in mind is that it obviously is growing and something that we know is widespread. Facebook said Russia influenced 126 million people through Facebook alone. And we know that from the Russian side, it hasn't stopped. This story just came out. Facebook discovers an ongoing effort to influence the 2018 elections, which are coming up. My own view is that the real impact of fake news is that it breeds frustration and disengagement by citizens because it sows confusion and doubt. It's like a lake that becomes polluted. You may not actually be harmed by anything in the water. You may not swallow any of it. But the whole idea of diving in and taking a swim loses its appeal. You turn away. You go do something else. And I think that is one of the things that concerns me, is whether fake news helps contribute to voter apathy and dissatisfaction. But whatever the harm is, I think the harder question is, what do you do about it? What do you do about fake news? The major platforms are all struggling to decide what they should do. Facebook initially took the position that it had no role in it. It was simply a platform, and it was open. Over time, it has changed, and it's trying several tactics. It's labeling sites that appear to be fake. It's moving trusted sources up news feeds. And it's taking down some sites, usually not because they're fake, but because of some violation of the terms of service. This was one of the biggest stories last week in the United States. Alex Jones and InfoWar content is removed from Apple, Facebook, and YouTube. He is one of the leading purveyors of fake news, including the story that prompted the gunman to go to the restaurant and try to break up the child sex ring. But even that raises questions about power. Should Facebook have that kind of power? Do we want Facebook to be a private ministry of truth, telling us what to think? A private ministry of who to trust and who not to? Its power is enormous. And what checks are there on that power? The question I get asked the most is, what can the law do about this? You're a lawyer. Can it really be that you just sit around and watch democracy go down the drain of fake news? Interesting question, and that's where this man comes in. This man is Xavier Alvarez, and he was at the center of a famous 2012 U.S. Supreme Court case. The decision in his case begins with some famous words from American court decisions. Lying was his habit. Mr. Alvarez told people he had been a professional athlete. That was not true. He told people that he had been married to an actress, famous actress. That wasn't true. He told people that he had won the highest military honor given by the United States government. That was not true, and it was also a crime. In the United States, under federal law, it was a crime to lie about having a medal that you had not earned. You see, he does like his medals. And he took an incredible step, and that was, he said, yes, I lied, but I have a First Amendment right to lie in the United States. He said it's no crime to just lie for lying's sake. The U.S. Supreme Court agreed. The court said the government shouldn't be in the business of policing lying. The main decision in that case said that the government is not a ministry of truth out to punish people who lie. I think that that case was rightly decided under American law. It is dangerous for government to be deciding who can speak and who can't, even when it involves lying and deception. What we need instead is better readers and viewers and social media users. We need people who have the critical thinking skills needed to separate fact from truth, the real from the fabricated. No government program can achieve that. No law can make that happen. And it will be a long and hard process and frustrating. And it's not even clear how we do it. But ultimately, I think that's the answer. And I think it's the answer that we have to find. We turn to the people and we trust the people because the American system is based on not trusting the government. We have seen around the world governments taking a different approach. They have tried to pass laws against fake news. That is understandable. And maybe somebody will find a way to do this. Maybe somebody will come up with a way that the law can be designed so it both respects freedom of speech and also addresses fake news. But that's not what we're seeing in the examples from around the world. If you look at the countries that are passing these laws, Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, it is clear what's really happening. The government is using the law not to weed out falsity, but to silence the opposition. It really involves the government in incredibly difficult adjudications that can't possibly be decided easily. If you think about during the last U.S. election, the Trump campaign saying that Hillary Clinton was in poor health. How do you prove the truth of that? What standards do you use? The other side said Donald Trump cheated on his taxes. That's a complicated question since we don't ever see his tax returns, let alone know what he did. Those are not questions that are really easily weighed by government bodies or courts. Sometimes I think of the attempt to clean up fake news as if someone has complained about rocks on the beach and somebody's going to have to go out with a spoon and try to pick them up. The widespread nature of fake news makes this an impossible task. And that's why I want to turn to the second part of what I said, which is I see fake news as being two problems. One is the one I just talked about, but I actually think the danger comes from the second part of the fake news problem, and that is this. When people in power use the term to try to get people to not believe the media. The term is now used by President Trump and others to attack journalists and news organizations, not when something is false, but because there is a truth they do not like. And that is the danger. It is a persistent and mindless attack on those who want to publish facts that the president and his administration don't want people to believe. When people ask me what is the danger facing press freedom in the United States, this is the point I keep coming back to. I don't worry that there's going to be a change in the law. What worries me is the hearts and mind problem. The campaign by the administration to convince people not to believe what they see on CNN or read in the New York Times or the Washington Post. Here's the thing to keep in mind about that. If the press is not believed in a society, it doesn't matter how much press freedom there is. Okay? A disbelieved press is like a controlled or repressed press. It has no power to move public opinion or serve as a check on government. It is powerless. So the use of fake news as a propaganda tool to convince people not to believe the media is in effect an attempt to control the press. In the US, we have seen this over and over again, and you see how it played out. The President has tweeted, "Fake news media is not my enemy, it is the enemy of the American people," drawing that line that somehow the mainstream media is working against American interests. You then see a classic example of this. There was a poll that came out that showed that the American people didn't like the administration's immigration policies. And as the President tweeted, any negative polls, are fake news. Okay. Again, sort of the example of exactly what I'm saying. The problem is not criticism of the problem is not criticism of the news media. That's not the problem. Criticism of the media, like the criticism of any powerful institution, is essential. It has to happen. It's part of the lifeblood of democracy. The problem is the nature of the criticism. Denouncing a story on CNN or in the Times as fake news is not embracing the truth. It's just the opposite. It is asking people to skip over the analytical step of weighing what is true and what is not, and instead prodding them to simply dismiss what they don't like hearing. But truth exists in the world. It gets proved to the best of our ability. Think about how a trial works, right? We're in an audience of lawyers. Think about how a trial works. One side gets up and offers evidence and arguments. Then the other side gets a chance to respond to them, right? They put on their own evidence. They challenge the evidence that's been put before the court. The other side is not allowed, though, to simply jump up and say, "Fake evidence," and get a high five from the judge. That's not how it works. And that's not how it should work in society. I also just have to mention in passing before I close that there's another side to this that the tweets have created, another side of the problem, and that is I think it does encourage people to take out their anger on journalists, and that's becoming a dangerous situation. Our publisher at the New York Times went to meet with the President to talk about that issue. Now, it was an off-the-record conversation, which meant it was off the record until the President found his cell phone and started tweeting about it, okay? And so he tweets, this is his account of the meeting. Had a very good and interesting meeting at the White House with A.G. Sulzberger, publisher of the New York Times. Spent much of the time talking about the vast amounts of fake news being put out by the media and how that fake news has morphed into the phrase enemy of the people. Sad. Well, when I read that, I thought that was kind of unusual. It seemed unlikely the New York Times publisher sat around and said, you know, there's a lot of fake news on the New York Times. Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, all right, okay. In fact, here's what happened. New York Times publisher warned Trump attacks on media will lead to violence. And that was what our publisher had come to say, that because candidates that stir up animosity and hatred towards the press, it becomes harder to do your job as a journalist, but more than that, it becomes dangerous. Just last week, there was a story about how the major TV networks in the U.S. are now hiring security guards for their reporters when journalists are covering the president's rally. It was a deeply troubling story for anybody who cares about democracy, that journalists have to come with bodyguards. But let me conclude with this. I don't mean to suggest that any of these problems are easy to solve. There is a serious problem with online content. Not just fake news, but hate speech and online bullying the malicious invasion of privacy. And those are problems that challenge all of us who are true believers in a free speech and free press. It really comes back to a single question. How do we address these problems and still have free speech? I don't have the answer to that. I've tried to suggest part of the answer today, but I don't have the answer. It's going to take much more thinking and discussing and contemplating how to get there. But we need to find the answer if democracy is going to survive in a digital age like the one we live in. The only thing I know for sure is this. The answer to the question will not be solved in 280 characters on Twitter. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada pela brilhante palestra. Tenho certeza que foi excelente para todos nós. Realmente, esse tema das fake news é mais um dos assuntos em que estamos começando. Toda essa era digital, internet, WhatsApp, Facebook, tudo isso é muito novo e estamos ainda engatinhando nessa época das redes sociais. Temos muito que aprender, muito que avançar, e é importante a gente sempre debater, trocar ideias para avançar em busca da democracia. Eu agora vou passar a palavra ao nosso debatedor, o Anderson Schreiber, nosso procurador.
Obrigado, Júlia. Queria, em primeiro lugar, dizer que é uma honra participar aqui ao lado do professor David McCraw, que, para quem não sabe, é uma referência mundial nesse tema, pessoa com vasta experiência prática e acadêmica sobre o assunto. O professor McCraw atuou em diversos casos importantes relacionados ao New York Times. Ele é o advogado responsável pela parte de jornalismo na equipe jurídica do New York Times. Então, é uma pessoa que tem muito a nos ensinar, tem atuações em diversos precedentes importantes nos Estados Unidos. Então, é uma honra recebê-lo, estar do seu lado aqui na Procuradoria Geral do Estado. O papel do debatedor é um pouco suscitar questões, tentando fazer um paralelo com a situação do Brasil, né? Então, eu teria essencialmente duas questões aqui rapidamente para colocar. Uma, professor McCraw, diz respeito a essa definição de fake news, né? Se há, na experiência atual dos Estados Unidos, uma definição um pouco mais, talvez, técnica ou jurídica do que sejam fake news. Por que isso? Porque no Brasil, como a Júlia colocou, engatinhando um pouco nesse debate ainda, a gente tem uma variedade de casos muito grandes. Então, por exemplo, a gente tem primeiro caso que a Polícia Federal anuncia como primeiro indiciamento por fake news no Brasil, aconteceu por conta de um episódio ocorrido nas eleições de 2014, eleição para o cargo de governador do Espírito Santo, em que um sujeito falseou na internet, criou um site falso, imitando a página de um jornal local, a Gazeta, e publicou a pesquisa eleitoral, às vésperas da eleição, trocando o candidato que estava em primeiro lugar com o candidato que estava em segundo. Era a disputa entre o Renato Casagrande e o Paulo Artung, e ele inverteu as posições da pesquisa, do Instituto de Pesquisa, naquele site que simulava o site de um jornal. Ali, evidentemente, a gente tem alguns elementos que quem tem discutido isso no Brasil tem considerado como elementos importantes para caracterizar fake news. Então, por exemplo, a intenção deliberada de realmente enganar o público e influenciar na disputa eleitoral. Mas a gente tem outras situações, por exemplo, o Sensacionalista, que é um site humorístico, publicou notícias dizendo que um determinado candidato à presidência da República não era favorável a investimentos em educação, porque quanto mais educado era o povo brasileiro, menos voto ele tinha. Então, essa foi a notícia dada pelo site. E ali, obviamente, a a não verdade existe, quer dizer, aquilo não é verdadeiro, a pessoa jamais declarou aquilo, ou pelo menos jamais aquilo foi expressamente declarado pelo candidato. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, a intenção ali era satírica, era humorística, ou seja, como diferenciar esses casos em que você não tem uma intenção deliberada de enganar o público dos que você tem. E outra coisa que se discute hoje ainda nesse tema da definição é, importa quem é a fonte das fake news, porque muitas vezes são, voltando ao tema das eleições, muitas vezes são os próprios candidatos que produzem as fake news, no sentido de, se a gente pegar o último debate no Brasil, a quantidade de números errados e notícias que não eram verdadeiros, fatos que não eram exatamente aqueles que estavam sendo relatados, às vezes por descuido, às vezes por falta de memória, mas que não eram exatamente verdadeiros, eram muitos. Então, isso pode ser considerado fake news, né? Quer dizer, como é que a gente lida com essa, se existe, em síntese, a pergunta é essa, se existe uma definição de fake news em termos jurídicos, porque a gente não tem legislação, naturalmente, sobre isso. Os dispositivos que são usados, por exemplo, que foram usados nesse caso da condenação com base nas eleições de 2014, onde houve uma transação penal no fim do processo, para prestação de serviço comunitário, mas os artigos que foram usados são artigos do Código Eleitoral, que tipificam a conduta de embaraçar as eleições, de divulgar pesquisas falsas. Então, são artigos que não foram construídos para esse cenário, mas que foram usados ali. Então, a pergunta é se tem uma definição nos Estados Unidos sobre isso. E a segunda e última pergunta é sobre justamente os remédios para lidar com isso, né? Quais são as consequências que têm sido invocadas na experiência americana para as fake news. A gente vê hoje a gente vive no Brasil um cenário em que a grande imprensa, a mídia tradicional, de certa maneira, ela enfatiza muito o tema das fake news. De certa forma, as fake news mostraram, ou pelo menos há esperança dos meios tradicionais, que mostrem a importância deles no controle da legitimidade da notícia. Enquanto no terreno livre da internet, a gente não tem esse tipo de controle, né? Então, a mídia tradicional enfatiza a importância das fake news e de ter um certo controle de legitimidade da notícia. As redes sociais, por outro lado, têm se movimentado, pelo menos no Brasil. O Facebook anunciou, alguns meses atrás, um convênio com uma agência de fact-checking para tentar controlar a veracidade do que circula. Há gente no Brasil que sustenta que as redes sociais deveriam ser responsabilizadas pela veiculação de notícias falsas, mesmo não sendo elas as produtoras do conteúdo falso. E há até já discussões judiciais, inclusive, sobre responsabilidade de administrador de grupo de WhatsApp que encaminha notícias falsas para as pessoas. Ou seja, a minha pergunta é que remédios nos Estados Unidos têm sido pensados para essa situação e se esse caminho da responsabilização é um caminho que lhe parece efetivo ou, se ao contrário, sua impressão é de que isso não vai resolver o problema.
Well, those are all very good questions that would keep us here till tomorrow. So I will try to be brief. The fake news never comes up as a legal concept in the United States. It's not illegal. There are no laws against it. As I mentioned, the Supreme Court has said that there's a First Amendment right that covers lying as well as truth-telling. There are 3 times when falsity is punished under the law, or could be. One is libel, defamation, but that requires that the fake story, the false story, hurt somebody's reputation, okay? And so that is rarely the case with fake news, that anybody is going to say it actually hurt a reputation. And if you're a public official in the United States, it's very, very, very difficult to win a libel suit. So that is really not a check on fake news. You can also be prosecuted or sued in the United States for lying to gain money from somebody, misleading them to give you money. Fraud. None of these cases are really that. The fake news isn't really attempting to get the reader of it to send money. They're trying to get the reader to believe something or not. So that's fraud. The third way it comes up, where something that's not true may be the subject of a lawsuit, involves the kind of parody that Anderson was talking about, where there is somebody making fun of somebody, and the story is the content's obviously not true. And even there are great limits. There was a famous case in the United States, Hustler magazine was involved, in which Hustler magazine, a scandalous magazine, did a parody of an evangelical leader. And the parody suggested the evangelical leader had first had sex with his mother in an outhouse, okay, in a restroom. It was not true. It was an attempt to, very poor attempt to make humor. And the evangelical leader sued. And the Supreme Court took the case and said, you can't bring a case of emotional distress. That's what he argued. He didn't argue that he was liable. He didn't argue that his reputation was hurt. He argued instead that his feelings were hurt, that he suffered emotional distress after reading the magazine. Why he was reading the magazine is another question. But that he, but he claimed emotional distress, and the Supreme Court essentially said, we're not going to take that kind of claim except in the most extreme circumstances, and now they've pretty much written it out of the law. So there's never an attempt to really have to define fake news from a legal perspective. That pushes everything over into solutions that aren't driven by law and go to the second question, which is about the remedies. As I said, high concept, difficult abstract concept is that we have to trust people to be able to sort it out. That it's up to people to be critical readers and to have critical skills in reading Facebook and in watching television and doing anything else that involves getting content. But there are other things that will help. There's been a lot of discussion here in Brazil, I know, about fact-checking, and most newspapers, most of the big newspapers in the United States are doing the same thing. They have fact-checking columns. There are independent organizations online that do fact-checking, and that's a good thing. People still have to see it, but that's a good thing. I think that the platforms play a role. I think the better solution for most platforms is not taking things down, even though they have the power to do so, but in helping readers understand things that may be untrue. So that may be flagging stories where there are doubts about it. It may be making sure that readers know that if a story says something, that there are other stories out there that are easily linked to that say something else. All of that strikes me as being consistent with the tradition of relying on readers to decide for themselves and engage in their own pursuit of the truth. I think the platforms have to be much more open with us about how they flag things. They should have standards. They should publish those standards. If you can go now and you can look at Facebook standards or Twitter standards. They have none of the precision of law, and it's unclear how they apply them, what they think of as hate speech, what they think of as speech that exceeds their rules. They should be more open about that, because that's part of us understanding and having an ability to check their power. But ultimately, I really think that the proportional response, the right response here, is to make sure that newspapers are covering fake news as a phenomenon, that are exposing those who bring up fake news, that readers themselves engage and challenge when they think something's not true. As I said, the effect of fake news is unclear, and I think we want to be careful not to overreact to it We want to be careful not to have a cure that's worse than the disease itself. But I really think, at least under the American scheme of democracy, the remedy lies with the readers, with the people. I can tell you, as an American, and you as Brazilians will believe this statement, just as I as an American believe it, voters sometimes do crazy things. That has been your experience. That has been my experience. But I don't think the remedy for that is to take away the vote or decide who can vote and who can't. It is that we continue reiterating and reiterating it, and in the long run, we hope people get it right. And that's really the best and the democracy can offer, and it's a good thing.
Anderson quer pontuar mais alguma coisa? Podemos abrir para perguntas, então. Rodrigo Mascarenhas.
Boa tarde. Parabéns aí pelo evento. O Facebook derrubou algumas páginas aqui no Brasil, mas uma das suas justificativas não era de que o seu conteúdo era falso, e sim de que aquela pessoa que aparecia como autor do conteúdo, na verdade, não existia, né? Era um robô. Isso é a primeira hipótese. E uma segunda hipótese era uma situação em que a pessoa até existia, mas um determinado site estava veiculando aquele conteúdo como se fosse daquela pessoa, mas de forma automática. Então, aquela pessoa não tinha produzido aquele conteúdo. Isso não seria um caso em que claramente as plataformas deveriam controlar? Porque aí eu tenho uma falsidade, independente da falsidade do conteúdo, eu tenho uma falsidade do autor. Essa é a primeira pergunta. A segunda pergunta, eu reconheço que controlar a verdade é muito difícil, sobretudo quando a gente vai falar de causas, né, o que ocasionou isso ou aquilo. Mas em casos extremos, como foi o exemplo da declaração Papa apoia Trump, não seria razoável abrir a exceção e permitir que as plataformas fizessem esse controle? Obrigado.
Those are good questions. And you're absolutely right that in the takedowns that were done in Brazil, just as they were in the United States, it was not because of fake news, it was because of violations of the terms of service. I think that it's absolutely within Facebook's right to do that. I think that that's a good step as long as we understand the standards that are being applied. What Facebook and Twitter and the other platforms wield enormous power, and under U.S. law, there is not much that anybody can do to check that power, and they owe it, I think, to the public to be open and transparent. Let's see what the standards are so we as a people can judge whether it's done fairly. We as a people can judge whether it is being used against one side or the other. So that I don't have a problem with, as long as the standards are clear and they're applied uniformly and we know how they're being administered. I do have to say, though, that in the United States, because there's no bit of freedom of speech we haven't yet touched upon, is the Supreme Court has also said there's a right to anonymous speech, that people have a right to speak anonymously. And I understand that most of us think, that's not so great, okay? that shouldn't people have to put their name to it. But the Supreme Court looks back at the history of the First Amendment and finds that anonymous speech has been important throughout history, going all the way back to the founders of America, who wrote pamphlets under fake names because they didn't want the British to kill them. So all of these things pose difficult questions, and I think it would be wrong to pass a law that said Facebook had to post only signed postings, that it had to know who the author was, but I certainly understand their desire to eliminate fake accounts, and they have the right to do that. The question about the Trump being endorsed by the Pope is interesting, because some people look at that and say, well, it was so obvious. Did somebody really believe Pope Francis endorsed Donald Trump? Who would believe that? Well, my answer is 8% of the American people. But it seems to me that the better solution is, if that is showing up on social media, that there be some sort of flagging of a question about it, links to stories that show it's not true, coverage of stories that it's not true, reader comments. It's not a perfect solution. We're not going to find a perfect solution, but I usually think that more speech is a better answer than less speech. I had the same problem.
Tá bom. Meu nome é Bruno Gentil, eu sou aluno da UERJ, fui aluno do professor Schreiber, inclusive. Estou fazendo uma monografia justamente sobre esse tema de pós-verdade, fake news. E a minha pergunta é a seguinte: o ministro do TSE, em discurso proferido aqui na PGE, disse que o tribunal só tomaria atitudes jurídicas por fake news após o eventual dano. Eu queria saber a sua opinião sobre a declaração, sabendo que temos exemplos empíricos do perigo da pós-verdade e das fake news, como podemos ter visto nas eleições de 2016, nos Estados Unidos, e no Brexit, né, do Reino Unido.
Thank you, Bruno. Some of you may know, maybe many of you know, that to come to Brazil, I have to get a visa. And so I have promised not to get in trouble with the Brazilian government by doing because I'd like to come back and see Rio. So I'm going to speak in general rather than specific, because I don't really know enough about what the government has done. And it comes down to this, that I think there's two really good questions in there. One is fake news a problem? Can we prove that? And second, what should the remedy be? Should there be a legal remedy? And I think the research is very incomplete right now. That the research I've seen, what it typically happens, the most common effect is that fake news is effective in keeping people from going to the polls to vote. Okay, that much of the campaign that was done through Cambridge Analytica, the company that's been at the center of a controversy in the United States, the consulting company that worked with Donald Trump, their messaging was not vote for Trump. Their message was stay home. Their message was Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate, or she hurt people who look like you, and why bother voting? And so I do think it has some effect in reinforcing that instinct to do nothing. So, but as far as people believing, I think that the research on that is incomplete, and I think that probably in the end it's going to be seen that not that much believing goes on when people see fake news. That's and I think it's important though to not overreact and it's just assume that everybody believed fake news but me. I mean, that's part of the problem of human nature, right? You look at that and you say, oh, I know that wasn't true, but everybody I work with is kind of stupid and they wouldn't know it. Okay, so we sometimes overreact. as far as the legal remedies, as I said, I just don't think it's effective, and I don't think it's a good public policy. I think it's taking away from the people their own responsibility to be critical thinkers and critical readers, that it's essentially posing the government as a parent. I said last night when I was doing a presentation in Brasilia that it's hard for me to say this, that there should be no laws about this, because as a lawyer, I like to see my fellow colleagues employed. It seems like we would have a lot of lawyers involved if you tried to get to the bottom of this. But in seriousness, I come back to my idea that we live and die by the people, and that in the long term, we have to believe that the people will do the right thing, the truth will emerge, and that government's role should be extremely limited.
Oi. Queria fazer duas perguntas para o professor David. A primeira é a seguinte. Algumas pesquisas demonstram que notícias fact-checkers acabam aumentando a visibilidade das fake news. Tá? No Brasil, nós temos um ecossistema informacional que é controlado basicamente por 5 grandes famílias, e os níveis de descrédito na grande mídia estão beirando mais ou menos o que nós vimos em 2016 nos Estados Unidos. Tá? Então, a primeira pergunta é: deve a grande mídia lutar contra as fake news ou manter uma posição mais calada, tentando que ela simplesmente desapareça com novas notícias? E a segunda pergunta é: considerando que desde que a internet é totalmente personalizada, e que as pessoas cada vez mais vivem em filtros bolhas, já devemos começar pensando numa democracia para daqui a 10 anos, pensar em retirar um pouco dessa personalização da internet para que todo mundo tenha acesso a vasto conteúdo e não apenas ao que está sendo empurrado para a gente pelos filtros de personalização.
Yeah, I think it's imperative that mainstream media, traditional media, cover fake news as a topic and engage in fact-checking and making it public. I agree with the question that sometimes it legitimizes the fake news by addressing it and by suggesting there's a debate about it. There's a certain number of people who are going to say, well, there's probably 2 sides to this, when there's not. So I think that the mainstream media should cover fake news the same way they cover any social phenomenon, that they should be covering it, finding out who's behind it, writing about it, talking about the research that's being done on it, and make it an issue for the public. I think it actually, the experience of the New York Times has been that people, and the Washington Post and other major outlets in the U.S., is that in an era of fake news, they have done well financially at a time when it's very, very hard to survive financially as a mainstream media organization. People are turning to publications that they trust, and it becomes very important that all of us who are in the mainstream media and are the recipients of that trust honor that trust by continuing to do the best job possible telling the truth, correcting errors when we make them, and essentially making sure that the world gets covered fairly and as fully as possible. I think that in some ways, being silent about fake news is the worst possible solution, because I think that we do have to go out there and try as we might to attack it, whether as citizens or as part of the media. The second part of the question raised what I think is a really interesting social phenomenon, and that is the personalization of news. And absolutely, the financial imperative at most organizations is personalization. No question about it. That that there is, at every publication that's trying to survive on the internet, every news organization, they are looking for ways to deliver news that the people have said they want. And I agree, it can go too far. When I was a student in journalism school, back when things were easier and simpler, and you know, I remember my professor saying that it's to survive as a newspaper needs to give people what they want to know and what they need to know. And I think we'll do a great disservice to democracy if we forget the last half of that. That I think in personalization, that we also need to be serving up stories that we think are important. And the New York Times, in approaching this question, has looked at that. That we know someone likes football. We know that person also likes cooking. We're not going to just serve up a page that's all, here's how to make that cake, and here's who won the football game last night. We're also going to be suggesting the stories that are trending, that are important, and we're hopeful that in that way we will be able to provide our best content at the same time we provide the content that people want.
Alô. Primeiro, queria dar os parabéns ao Centro de Estudos Jurídicos pela iniciativa de ter convidado o professor David McCraw aqui para a Procuradoria Geral do Estado. É uma honra para todos nós, procuradores, e todos aqui assistir o professor. Queria fazer uma provocação ao professor David, não sei a que ponto ele acompanha com proximidade a política brasileira, mas o que a gente tem no cenário hoje que se avizinha é um candidato que lidera as pesquisas de opinião, parece com uma longa margem de dianteira em relação aos demais candidatos, que o grande ídolo dele, e ele fala isso de maneira muito explícita e sem nenhum tipo de vergonha ou vontade de esconder, é o Trump. Tanto que ele é chamado como Trump brasileiro e tem, em todos os momentos, colocado que realmente a referência dele em termos de político internacional é o Trump. E a gente tem uma democracia que é uma democracia muito mais incipiente, não é uma democracia consolidada como a democracia americana é. Queria saber assim, a opinião do senhor. Que risco, o que a gente pode correr, o que o brasileiro pode esperar caso essas pesquisas de opinião venham a confirmar o candidato que hoje se apresenta como líder das pesquisas, que tem uma postura absolutamente reativa a toda a mídia tradicional, parece ter um diálogo direto com a população, parece que também é usuário de alguma forma de fake news, e sabendo de uma grande diferença, um hiato muito grande que existe entre a democracia americana e a democracia brasileira. Que tipo de conselho que você poderia dar a nós, eleitores brasileiros, sobre talvez esse risco que se avizinha? Não sei se você vê isso como um risco ou como... queria saber como é que o senhor enxerga esse cenário.
Well, as I mentioned, because I know this individual could win and you need a visa to come to Brazil and I want to come back, I'm going to probably answer this in the abstract. First, I have to say it's an honor to be here. This is such an impressive program, and it has been such a treat for me to come to understand so much more about what's going on in Brazil. Over the last couple days that I've been in Brazil, people have tried to explain the election to me, and somebody finally gave me a break and said, Brazil is not for beginners. I agree. You know, I think that the risk, whenever there is an attack on the press, is that it's important to go back to something I think is fundamental about democracy, and that is that our need to stand up for opinions we disagree with. That the unfortunate thing, I think, about the way polarization has worked is that there has been a loss of the idea that we're in this together. That includes the press. They're not the enemy of the people. They make mistakes, but they're important, in the scheme of things. So are politicians, and so are voters. And I think it just forces all of us to double down in the United States and do this kind of presentation, which I do all over the United States whenever I'm invited, to try to encourage people to understand that we owe an obligation to the civic idea of engagement, of being part of a society. We're going to argue like a family, but like a family we have to come back together. And I certainly wish in the United States that Donald Trump would remind people of that the press plays an important role. He can disagree with us all he wants. He can say if he thinks we got our facts wrong, he can show us the facts that we got wrong. But I do believe that all of us, whether we're school children learning about democracy or veteran voters, need to be reminded that the winner should be democracy, not one party or the other, ultimately. And we've sort of lost that sense of it. President Obama, on his way out, I thought was an incredible model. Whatever you thought about what he'd done, it was an incredible model of what it was to be a democratic, lowercase d, a democratic citizen. And that was, he said to people, give him a chance, give Trump a chance. You know, the people have spoken. That's how it works in our country. And the people will speak again. That's how it works. And I think we just need to come back to that and not sort of be in this Darwinian, I won and I can do anything I want. We need to find a way to engage with each other. But it's not been easy, and it's in some ways it's been positive, and I think people are talking about these issues. I'm hopeful that that conversation will lead to a renewal of that democratic spirit. So, but it's a long process, and it's not easy.
Alô? Oi. Meu nome é João Quinelato, sou aluno dos professores Anderson, professor Fernando. Parabenizar o Serjur pelo belíssimo evento gratuito, muito bacana para nós ter essa oportunidade e receber o professor David na casa. Professor, se eu bem entendi, me parece que o senhor, quando vai tratar dos remédios, entende que uma das alternativas seria flaguear os conteúdos, né, inserir links ali, para que a gente fosse levado à informação verdadeira. A segunda grande alternativa, que me parece muito inteligente também, seria uma tomada de responsabilidade dos próprios leitores, né, dos ouvintes das fake news, que teriam que desenvolver um senso crítico. Eu gostaria de fazer, se o senhor me permite, um contraponto, ou talvez contextualizar essas alternativas no Brasil, principalmente no cenário eleitoral. Com relação à responsabilidade do ouvinte, me preocupa, apesar de eu achar uma solução muito arguta, me preocupa atribuir a uma audiência com pouca formação, uma formação escolar muito baixa, com baixíssimo viés crítico e talvez com pouca autonomia de encontrar o caminho de ser um leitor crítico. Então, talvez me parece que essa não seria uma alternativa, pelo menos no cenário brasileiro, ou uma alternativa que a gente tivesse de repensar. E aí eu queria ouvir o senhor a respeito disso, se o senhor tem, o que o senhor acha desse desafio. Em relação ao segundo ponto, especificamente com relação ao cenário eleitoral, eu gostaria de saber do senhor se o senhor admite ou se o senhor acha possível uma temporária limitação à liberdade de expressão. E aí, portanto, a gente admitir a retirada de determinados conteúdos manifestamente falsos dos meios de comunicação. Me parece que o voto é a expressão mais concreta do direito de liberdade do indivíduo. E que, portanto, o voto livre, o voto informado, o voto construído a partir de informações verdadeiras, pudesse talvez admitir uma limitação temporária ao direito à ampla liberdade. E eu queria ouvir o senhor se, pelo menos no período eleitoral, seria razoável se admitir uma limitação temporária para o direito à liberdade de expressão e retirar, portanto, do ar os conteúdos manifestamente ilegais. Muito obrigado.
Those are really provocative thoughts, and I think get at really hard issues of freedom of expression. I am going to not surprise you and say I don't really think that limitations are the way to go. And if you look at the history of the United States, there were a lot of fits and starts. That the United States had not been a country for more than a couple decades when the most severe censorship law was passed, the Treason and Sedition Act, Alien and Sedition Act. I think that's to be expected, that it takes a while to get the democratic muscles working. I'm not sure that I would say I would be against it, that limitations on free expression are the way to go, because I think that even in a society that has people who may have limited access to education or media or so forth, I think they're still able to engage in self-governance. But let me say this, you put your finger on what is now a very big debate in the United States, which is the inequities in the marketplace of ideas. There is a new law review article out that's circulating quite widely, and its title is, "Can the First Amendment be Progressive?" No. Okay? That the theory is that because of unequal power in the marketplace, that corporate speech is going to drown out citizen speech, and so forth. And there's no question that when I come to Brazil or go to other countries where they're really talking about trying to create a fairer marketplace of speech, I understand why that's so. I get that it shouldn't be that the person who can buy the most ads gets the most attention. It shouldn't be that people who can overwhelm you on Facebook drown you out, and so forth. I'm just not certain that government limits are the way to solve that problem. I think that it's really should be a call for those who disagree to make sure that they're heard, to keep pressing it. And I realize that's idealistic, but I ultimately think in the long run that is the right answer. As I come back to, I keep fearing that the cure will be worse than the disease, and the American system has been based on the idea of distrusting government, and we embrace that idea, and it sometimes doesn't work out for us, but I think in the long run it can and should.
Boa tarde a todos. Meu nome é Francisco Ferreira da Silva. Tá? Eu sou candidato a deputado estadual pelo Estado do Rio de Janeiro. Tá? Eu vim aqui assistir essa palestra por causa do assunto pertinente ao processo que nosso país está passando agora. Tá? A minha pergunta é o seguinte: eu não conheço a legislação americana, tá? Conheço a legislação brasileira, conheço a Constituição brasileira. Aqui no nosso país temos a Lei Carolina Dickmann, todo mundo sabe o que aconteceu com a atriz. Temos a Lei da Ficha Limpa, temos a Lei do Processo Eletrônico, e o Brasil agora nós estamos passando pelo processo de informatização da nossa justiça, do judiciário, das repartições públicas. E até assim, pegando um contratempo aí, que aqui a nossa eleição é feita por urna eletrônica, e lá nos Estados Unidos se usa ainda papel. Tá? Apesar que eu sou professor de informática, tá? De carreira, tá? Tenho 34 anos na área de TI. Sobre fake news, assim, a minha pergunta para o professor é o seguinte, que as ameaças maiores aqui no Brasil vêm do Estado, as maiores fake news do Estado. Por exemplo, o processo eletrônico, o processo eleitoral aqui é o seguinte: a eleição 4 anos atrás, eu fui candidato, minha candidatura foi impugnada, porque eu caí na lei da ficha limpa, porque quando se faz busca nos bancos de dados públicos, do Tribunal de Justiça do Rio de Janeiro se faz pelo nome. Meu nome é Francisco Ferreira da Silva, eu sou brasileiro nato. Então, encontraram diversos processos com o meu nome, não com o meu CPF, o nome da minha mãe, nada disso. E, em seguida, o que é que o tribunal fez? Pegou a minha foto, pegou os dados, botou lá na internet, foi impugnada por ficha suja. Imprimi, guardei, tenho guardado comigo. Lá nos Estados Unidos, como é que funciona o processo eleitoral para um candidato comum?
Let me try to answer that simply. That you know, the candidates in the United States come from all walks of life and bring all sorts of different history, and it is not up to the state to decide who can run. The one exception is that that in some states, people who have been convicted of felonies lose their right to vote, and therefore they can't participate in the political process. There's a lot of criticism of that system. But by and large, if you are able to get on the ballot, and that usually means that either a party has endorsed you or enough of your neighbors have signed a petition so that your name appears on the ballot, you're allowed to run whatever your background is. I actually, years and years ago, before I was a lawyer, ran for office, so I know firsthand some of that. You know, if you're like me and you're a little insecure, you wonder whether people like you, and then you run for office and find out they don't. A painful lesson, as I finished 5th in a 6-person race. But again, it seems to me that letting the people make their choices is the important thing here, not having the state make determinations that whatever you've done in your past should somehow disqualify you.
Bom, nós vamos encerrar agora. O professor ainda vai para São Paulo hoje, daqui a pouco vai pegar outro avião, veio de Brasília. Tá, foi realmente um privilégio termos aqui nessa tarde. Agradecemos a todos pela presença e boa tarde.